Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva. Lila Pravishtom Vishnupada Paramahansa Privrajikacharya Stotra Shada Shri Srimadabhaya Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupada Paramahansa Privrajikacharya Stotra Shada Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupada Srila Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishtom Vishnupada Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivedanta Thakur Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Srila Jagannathas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Nitya Lila Pravishta Shri Gauriya Vaishnav Guru Varga Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol All Glory Samudavaris Hare Krishna All Glory Samudavaris Hare Krishna All Glory Samudavaris Hare Krishna All Glory Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga All Glory Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 12, Chapter 3, Text 51. Kallir dosha nidhe rajan asti hyeko mahan gunaha kirtana deva krishnasya Mukta Sangha Param Vrajet Kaler Dosha Nidhe Rajan Asti Hyeko Mahan Gunaha Kirtana Deva Krishnasya Mukta Sangha Param Vrajet Kaler dosha nidhe rajan asti heko mahan gunaha kirtana deva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajet. Kaler dosha nidhe rajan asti heko mahan guna kirtana deva krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajet. Kaler dosha nidhe rajan Asti heko mahan gunaha Kirtana deva krishnasya Mukta sangha param vrajet. Kalehe, of the age of Kali. Dosha nidhehe, in the ocean of faults. Rajan, O king. Asti, there is. He, certainly. Ekaha, one. Mahan, very great. Gunaha, good quality. Kirtanat, by chanting. Eva, certainly. Krishnasya, of the holy name of Krishna. Mukta Sangaha, liberated from material bondage. Param, to the transcendental spiritual kingdom. Vrajet, one can go. Translation. My dear king, although Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, there is still one good quality about this age. Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one can become free from material bondage and be promoted to the transcendental kingdom. Purport. After mentioning the innumerable faults of this age of Kali, Shukadev Goswami now mentions its one brilliant aspect. Just as one powerful king can kill innumerable thieves, one brilliant spiritual quality can destroy all the contamination of this age. It is impossible to overestimate the importance of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, especially in this fallen age. And again, the translation. My dear king, although Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, there is still one good quality about this age. Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, one can become free from material bondage and be promoted to the transcendental kingdom. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Tushe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're continuing the series of texts that are very thematically appropriate for the World Holy Name Week. And so today we read from this very famous text from the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. 12th canto actually sometimes we think is the shortest canto because it looks the smallest on the bookshelf. But actually by verse number, 2nd canto is actually shorter. But there's just longer purports. So the volume gets filled out a little. But 12th canto is, is not as small as it looks, just the purports are very succinct and concise in it. So we were reading this very sweet text about the glories of Kali Yuga, which is not something we often hear about. Most of the time when we're hearing 12th canto, it's far from the glories of Kali Yuga we're hearing about. We're hearing about the terrible descriptions, the short lifespans. People will be considered very beautiful by their long hair. We'll hear about all sorts of inversions of the societal order, and how everything is pretty much going as poorly as it can be. With the exception of a possible golden age, there doesn't really seem to be much positive prospect to Kali Yuga. However, we see here in this text that although it is this ocean of faults, and it is definitely an ocean of faults in one sense, where we're having direct pratyaksha of the faults that it is an ocean of. Around us all the time we're seeing so many terrible things with not much prospect for getting better. In the third world, as they call it, we're seeing so many violations of human dignity and all of these things, and very anti-devotional or even anti-mode of goodness sentiments. Everything is very much in the depths of degradation. But then even then in the first world, we don't really see so much of this. Actually, it's interesting, this language, first world, second world, third world, we now refer to it for socioeconomic status. But originally, third world just meant every country that wasn't engaged in the Cold War. If a country wasn't in the Cold War, it was third world. The first world was the capitalist, non-communist world. The second world was the communist world. And the third world was that they just weren't too bothered with the dilemma. And obviously, most of the countries that weren't bothered with the Cold War were the ones that weren't apparently materially advanced enough to sort of engage in these conflicts. So that's how that terminology started off. But even then, in the first world, we're still seeing such terrible things. On a governmental level, such horrendous things are being passed, really reflecting the demonic tendency of even this world. We'll see the effective means by which slaughterhouses for animals are being constructed, and they're being subsidized and encouraged, and all sorts of things by governments. The government's far from limiting the consumption of meat, far from restricting it and putting it within the Vedic version. Far from that, they're encouraging it under terms of an economic development. And then there's slaughterhouses of animals, and there's also the slaughterhouses of humans. The abortion industry is so large in this Kali Yuga. And just recently in New York, they passed a thing, maybe a year ago, where they allowed post-birth abortions, they call them. But it actually means the baby has already started coming out, and then they perform the abortion. And they were celebrating this. All the politicians, there was a video, they were cheering and clapping when they signed the thing in, because now they've, under all these slogans of Kali, very much Kali's slogans, and they'll say progress. Now we have allowed freedom for everyone. Freedom for everyone besides the babies that they're massacring in the womb. And then on TVs they'll say, oh no, it's just a born fetus. That's how they'll dehumanize the human being. All in the plan of what? Of limitless sense gratification. When one looks at the statistics, it's only 96 or 97% of abortions are done entirely just because the woman said, I had sense gratification, illicit relations. I didn't really want to have the child, so I just got rid of it. Often they'll present this idea that, oh, there's all these other reasons why we might need to have them, but the overwhelming majority, beyond 9 out of 10, 96%, are done entirely just because limitless sense gratification. So then we know, Kali, he's beating at the legs of dharma. Already 3 are gone. And with this, we can now see that even satya, even truthfulness is now being beaten. We're seeing all of these lies. Especially, I think, in the abortion industry, we can see one of the greatest aspects of the lies of Kali Yuga. We see how a human baby is being treated as what? Treated as just a lifeless thing. Completely denying the truth of their humanity, the truth of their life, in order, again, for the great principle of sense gratification and limitless sins, which defines the oceans of faults of Kali Yuga. They deny the basic truths of human life. And so like this, all sorts of things are happening. And that's actually one of the great ways that we're seeing that Kali Yuga is really, really happening. Because truth is being turned around and twisted. Now we don't know what is true at all. in general, devotees shouldn't watch the news too much anyways. Prabhupada watched a tiny bit for preaching, and that is perfect. That is all worshipable. But we should not divulge too much time into keeping really up to date with all the political theories. But even if one was to try, on the news, what do we see? Just confusion. One, if it's a right-wing leaning channel like Fox or something, we'll hear all about the glories of all of the right-wing parties and all the right-wing politicians and how evil all the left-wing ones are. If you go into a left-wing channel, like in America, they have CNN or whatever, then one will hear all the glories of all of the left-wing politicians, how they're saving the world from the evil right-wing politicians. And yet, what can be the truth? It's all hidden away. The dignity of truth is gone. Surely either extreme couldn't be true. But at least one of them must be lying. But if one of them must be lying, that's a solid half, at least, of the population that is being lied to regularly and internalizing those lies. Again, satya, truth, is completely degraded and lost. Is being degraded and lost. It's the last leg of dharma, and it's very much wavering. It's very weak now, barely standing. So, what a terrible condition Kali Yuga is. There's so many harsh things. We read of all of the terrible faults, and yet it can almost be hard to imagine how it could get that much worse. It's already a rather terrible condition. But however, and this is the one wonderful quality, because we know in every yuga there is the yuga dharma. There's meditation for Satya Yuga, yagya for Treta Yuga, archan for Dwapar Yuga, and then for us there is sankirtan. Kirtan is the dharma for this yuga. And there's one quality, as is said in the purport. In this purport, actually we'll find this in the 11th and 12th canto, and past the 14th chapter of 10th canto, when the purports were done by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. The purports follow rather strictly Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's purports, commentaries. Srila Prabhupada, at times, he would insert his own realizations, he would insert from other sources, he would elaborate much more. But further on, after that, it's almost entirely a recreation of Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad's commentaries. So, and we're finding this here in the purport. And what does it say? Even though there are all of these terrible things in Kali Yuga, just in the same way that if one has one good king, no matter how many evil people there are in the kingdom, with one good king, all of the thieves are killed. All of the thieves are done away with. No matter how many miscreants are under the rule of a good king, the quality of just one good king can destroy all of their negative influence on society. In the same way, the fact that this yuga's dharma is the Sankirtan, this is the great king of our yuga. And therefore, under this great king, we do not need to worry so much. The holy name is beyond any material consideration. And so, no matter what material factors are attacking us, it will constantly preserve. It's not even like a boat. Sometimes we will like to think is like a boat. This Kali Yuga is a terrible flooding of all of good qualities. It's a flood that is drowning everyone. But Harinam Sankirtan is like a boat that can let us be afloat on the ocean. And in one sense, obviously, this analogy is true. But in another, it's more like this Kali Yuga is an ocean of poison. But Harinam Sankirtan is an antidote. It neutralizes all of the terrible poison of this horrendous age. And because of this, even the great beings, all of the great kings and rishis in Satya Yuga, what do we read elsewhere in Bhagavatam? Kritadishu prajarajan kala vichanti sambhavan. That even those members of the great Satya Yuga, knowing what is to come, they prayed that they could take birth in Kali Yuga, which might seem very absurd to us. How would one want to take birth in such a terrible age as this? But this is again the glories. We know often we'll say there's pros and cons. There's pros and cons to every situation. And there's a lot of cons to Kali Yuga. But the one pro of the Yuga Dharma that is being propagated in this Kali Yuga far, far, far outweighs the long list of cons. But then there can be a few questions that could be asked. One can wonder, the holy name, what do we say of the holy name? Is Krishna himself? Actually, the holy name, they said, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said there is one difference between the holy name and Krishna. It's not that they are cent% the exact same. There is one difference that separates Harinam Prabhu from Krishna. Does anyone know what the difference is? The difference is that the holy name is even more merciful than Krishna. In every other respect, they are one and the same. And obviously, philosophically, they are. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was trying to emphasize the point of the glories of the holy name. That even compared to the person Krishna, Krishna's name is even more merciful to him than him. The name, when chanted in Kirtan, is even more merciful than Krishna himself. So we hear all of the glories of the holy name. And we know bhakti is coming from the Sarup Shakti. Bhakti is a form of the internal potency. And in order to chant the holy name effectively, what does one need? One needs bhakti. One needs to receive the holy name from a devotee. Srila Prabhupada will make this point often. That the first principle in chanting is to hear from the pure devotee. So devotion is the underlying principle of chanting. But this can sometimes make texts like this confusing. Because we hear in Kali Yuga, there is the chanting of the holy names. In Kali Yuga, it is glorified that Harinam, it is the most highest thing. People are praying to come to Kali Yuga in order to chant. But Kali Yuga is a material thing. Kali Yuga speaks of what? Of time, place, and circumstance, all material factors. Why then should the chanting of the holy name be rendered subservient, be rendered as dependent on material factors if it is only a fully spiritual thing? The holy name is so powerful, the holy name is so beyond any considerations, which is why we have the glories of Srila Prabhupada's preaching, because the holy name doesn't care if you're Indian, German, Australian, British, American, whatever. The holy name doesn't care if a person is male or female. It doesn't even care if a person is human or dog. We know so many sweet pastimes there are. The holy name doesn't care for any of these material factors. Why? Because it is fully spiritual. The superior energy need not follow the rules of the lower energy. So then we can ask ourselves, it can be a bit confusing, why then is the holy name always being said as, well, it is coming in Kali Yuga. In Kali Yuga, we know the glories of Harinam Sankirtan. Forget then such a high thing. It would be confusing if we were to say in Satya Yuga, the Sankirtan that is being performed, that people should pray. Even though it would make more sense from what we would expect, the people in Kali Yuga pray to be born in Satya Yuga to perform Sankirtan. But the opposite is said. Let alone how confusing it would be if we were to say one needs to be in Satya Yuga to perform Sankirtan, because Satya Yuga itself is also a material consideration. Why then do we say it is dependent on Kali Yuga? And actually the answer is well, actually it's not dependent on Kali Yuga. One could chant the holy names whenever. And perfection is attained, liberation, promotion to the transcendental kingdom is obtained even outside of Kali Yuga. But there is a special reason why it is being given in Kali Yuga. Jiva Goswami, he comments on this. And he says that in all the other yugas, there is still, even though they are something more advanced maybe in some general spiritual understandings, obviously they are conditioned material beings, and therefore what do they have? They have some false ego, ahankar. Even we see it so many pastimes, even in Satya Yuga, people, their ahankar is coming out. If they didn't have ahankar, they wouldn't be identifying with their material bodies. And if they wouldn't be identifying with their material bodies, what would they be doing here? So there must be some ahankar even in Satya Yuga. And it is because of this ahankar that they cannot engage so profusely in the Sankirtan movement. It is because of this that they cannot take to Hari Kirtan so strongly. Because with their long lifespans and their yuga dharma of meditation, they will hear the glories of the holy name. And I'll speak soon about maybe a tiny bit of the glories of the holy name in the Jamil's pastimes. They will hear maybe pastimes like a Jamil's pastimes, and they will scoff in the same way that the Yamadutas. The Yamadutas, when they came to capture a Jamil, 3 Yamadutas they came. Because a Jamil, he committed so many sinful activities in his life. And he committed them with what? A Jamil committed all his sinful activities with his body, mind, and words. So one Yamaduta came for all of the sins of his body. Another one came for all of the sins of his mind. And another one came for all of the sins of his words. Like this, a Jamil, he was doing so many things. Bhagavatam says he was gambling, he was cheating others, and he was tying others up. Bhagavatam literally says, tying others up. But tying others up in that time meant imprisoning others. So he was causing others to fall down into sin because of his sinful activities. Because we know back then they used to tie prisoners up. We know all the time we have the descriptions in Bali Maharaj pastimes. Bali Maharaj, he gets tied up as he's about to be imprisoned. So he's doing all of these things. And so because of all of these, 3 Yamadutas come for the 3 aspects of him, which was so much engaged in sin. And we know he so famously says, he calls out his youngest son, who he loves so much, because it is his time to pass away, seeing these scary beings, and then he says, Narayana, and he calls out, and calling out, a certain amount of Vishnu Dutas appear. Does anyone know how many Vishnu Dutas appear? 4 Vishnu Dutas appear, and there is a reason why. Because it is said in the purports, in the commentaries, that actually a Jamil forget about having forgiveness or having atonement for all of his sins at the time of saying Narayana on his deathbed. He actually already had all of his sinful activities atoned for the first time he named his son Narayana. Every time after then, he was building up Bhakti Sukriti. He was building up actually devotional advancement. Sridhar Swami says, the first time he said Narayan was enough that it was cleansed. The second time he started becoming a devotee. Everything else since then was like momentum of his material life. So, this is the glory of the holy name. But it is not just the glories of this. It is not just that the first time he said it, that he was instantly cleansed of all of his sinful activities. Actually, it said that the first time he began to call his son that, it was when he said Na. Then all of his sins were atoned for. Only by the saying of one syllable of the holy name of the Lord, only with that, all of these sinful activities are atoned for and cleansed away. So therefore, how many Vishnu Dutas came? 4 Vishnu Dutas came. 1 for Na, 1 for Ra, 1 for Ya, and 1 for Na. 1 for each syllable of Narayan. Because each syllable was worthy enough to bring the Vishnu Dutas. Each syllable was worthy enough to bring them to save him. So 4 Vishnu Dutas come, 1 for each syllable of Narayan. And why do they come? In Bhagavatam it says so beautifully, there's another text glorifying the glories of Hari Kirtan. It says that the Parshad, this is a Sanskrit word that's used, the Parshads of Vishnu, the associates of Vishnu, where do they rush to? Wherever the associates of Vishnu, wherever they hear Hari Kirtan is being performed, there they rush through to. A Jamil, he was performing Hari Kirtan. We should not. Sometimes we will, in order to glorify the holy name, we will minimize a Jamil's chanting and we will say, it is Namapas, and it is Namapas. Absolutely. But we should understand even the glories of Namapas. Even this is Hari Kirtan. Even this is what is being glorified in these texts. So they rush. Wherever there is Hari Kirtan, they rush. And there's a twofold purport to this. On the one hand, we who are trying to be Vaishnavas, we should always rush wherever there is Kirtan being performed. If it is Kirtan in the form of glorifying the holy names, if it is Kirtan in the forms of speaking and hearing the pastimes of Krishna, if it is Kirtan in the form of book distribution, wherever there is Kirtan being performed, we should rush to try and participate in it. Because then maybe Because then maybe we can cultivate that mindset that the Vaishnavas have, the highest Vaishnavas, those associates of Vishnu have, that wherever there's kirtan, they rush. But furthermore, there is a second purport. Because if we rush there, wherever there is Hari Kirtan being performed, then we will also get the associates of those devotees, those high devotees who are rushing there as well. We wish to go and have the association of the Vaishnavas. We wish to go to have the association of Vaishnav Thakur. But how will we know how to find Vaishnav Thakur? It is such a key element of our philosophy that the Kanishta Adhikari, who needs the association so much, as does the Uttama Adhikari. But the Kanishta Adhikari, he cannot see who is Uttama, who is Madhyama. He cannot discriminate. He is not aware who is on what platform. So then how can he guarantee that he will have sadhu sangha? He can guarantee that he will have sadhu sangha by rushing towards where Hari Kirtan is being performed. And if he rushes to where Hari Kirtan is being performed, then he will know for sure that I am going here in a forced way, but spontaneously the associates of the Supreme Lord, they will rush towards this execution of Hari Kirtan, and therefore I will have a chance to have the association of the devotees. So like these, the four Vishnu Duttas, they come, hearing Narayan, one for each syllable. And then they go, and the Yamadutas, they say, hey, you guys, you look very good. You're there with your yellow dhotis, your beautiful bluish skin. You seem to have all of these wonderful qualities. They have the same form as those who receive a Sarupya Mukti. Except the only difference between the people who receive Sarupya Mukti and the Supreme Lord is that they do not have the Kaustubha gem, and they do not have the singular golden hair on the chest. That is the way that Brahma, he distinguished when in the Brahma Vimohan Leela, when he saw all the forms of Vishnu, all the forms of Krishna had expanded out. All of the direct forms of Krishna, he had expanded out, obviously, to take the role of the calves and the cowherd boys. He realized that all of these are not associates from Vaikuntha who had come down. These are the Supreme Lord themselves, because they all have the Kaustubha gem, and they all have the golden hair on the chest. So because of this, they looked very nice, but they weren't the Supreme Lord himself. But they saw them and they said, well, you're looking very nice. Why are you stopping us? Because they were saying, stop, don't do this, don't do this. And the Yamadutas, they said, why are you trying to stop us? You are looking so nice, you're so well presented, you should be on our side. You should be helping us take him away to hell. Do you know who this is? This is our Jamil. And then so I'll condense because it's 3 chapters and they're all very nectarian, but I want to get to another point as well. But there's a back and forth. And they're speaking all of these things. And the Vishnu Duttas, it said that they smile. And their smile is conveying a message. Their smile is saying, wow, you're thinking you're servants of Yamaraj. But you don't even know the first step of dharma. And then even while smiling sweetly, their voices, they came out like thunder. And like thunder, what was heard? What is dharma? You call yourselves servants of Yamaraj, so then tell us, what is dharma? And they give really long. And actually, their understanding of dharma is not correct, but is not incorrect. It's an incomplete understanding of dharma that they speak. They speak about dharma in the Varnashram sense. They're saying, dharma is whatever the Vedas have prescribed. And whatever the Vedas have not prescribed is adharma. And then they speak for a while and they say, the glories of the Vedas is that everyone, they are under the 3 modes of material nature. So dharma is to follow the correct action dependent on those 3 modes. Like this they speak. And then they give this understanding. And it is not wrong, but it is not very complete either. Because it does not speak of the Jaiva dharma, of devotional service. So they've missed the main point. And because they have not understood this Jaiva dharma, because they have not understood devotional service, therefore they've missed the whole point. And then the Vishnu Duttas, they begin to lament. And they say, in the kingdom, the citizens, they are not familiar with the law because they trust that the rulers and that the police, they understand the legal systems. And with this trust, then society can go forward. Because the policemen, they understand what law is. But if the policemen and the kings do not understand what the nature of law is, then chaos happens. In the same way, we are lamenting because in the court of Dharma, in Yamaraja's court, some of his Yamadutas now are thinking adharma. There is a corruption in the minds of those people who are meant to be administering dharma. You do not understand. And they did not understand. In the same way that those people in Satya Yuga, because of their ahankar, would struggle to understand the glories of the holy name. And so the Yamadutas, they say, what do you mean we don't understand? And then they say, the Vishnudutas, they say, just by one chanting, even of one syllable of this holy name, 10 million births of sins have been cleansed away. And so actually there's a very, very long back and forth. And all these glories are explained. There's quite a few points which really emphasize the glories of the holy name. At one point the Yamadutas, they say, well, maybe he has atoned for all of his past births. But you see what he's doing now. You see what behavior, what actions he's performing. After atoning for them, he's now performing all these sins. So we're catching him on all of these sins he's performing after chanting the holy name. And then the Vishnudutas, they say, the holy name, forget about being independent of any place or any material condition of the body. It is also independent of time. 10 million births back and forth have been atoned for. All of this has been atoned for just because of his one chanting of Namabhas. And then they say, well, maybe that is true. But then surely all of the Gyanis, all of the Karma Yogis, all of these other spiritualists who are chanting the holy name, surely they also must have you come. We've taken many yogis away into the Yamaraja's court. Why then he is not being taken away? They were all chanting. They were all saying the name of the Lord, meditating on all these things. The Vishnudutas, they say, in the same way that a merchant, there might be a merchant and he is employing an employee. And if the employee says some insult to him, actually, I was saying this story another time, that in Port Macquarie we own a business, so we know the other business owners. And there's this one business owner, and he's Turkish, and he runs a restaurant, and he's a bit, he's a bit on the plump side of things. And one of his employees, a lot of his employees are from India. They're from Bharatvarsh. Many of them were from India. And so he's picked up some Indian sort of, some words that are common to the Indian languages. And I can't remember exactly what word it was, but one of his employees, he was telling us, he was Punjabi. So in Punjabi, he called his boss a fatty. He said, this fatty's telling me what to do. And so he thought, oh, he doesn't understand. But actually he did understand. And he was and he thought, oh, who are you? So he fired him. He fired him. He said, what's this sort of attitude, saying all these sort of things? In the same way, the holy name is like a merchant who is employing someone. If that person offends the holy name, if that person offends Bhakti Devi, Bhakti Devi can choose not to employ that person, can choose not to give money to that person in wages. That doesn't mean that Bhakti Devi doesn't have her potency. That doesn't mean that the holy name doesn't have his potency. It just means in the same way that the merchant doesn't lose any wealth by not giving it. He still has all that wealth. In the same way, the holy name has all this potency, but it does not have to give it to the person who is offending it. Which is why lots of people, they'll say a Jamil Katha, and they'll say, therefore I don't need to take my spiritual life so seriously. Just on my deathbed, I'll name my youngest son Narayan, and then boom, I'll get out of it all and I'll be able to go to Vaikuntha. But how many people were like a Jamil? A Jamil was in many ways like the perfect storm. How many people in a Jamil's case never perform a Nama Parad? That was a very specific case. How many Jamils are there? Maybe there will be others in history that did not perform Nama Parad. And therefore they went on the platform of faithless Namabhas. Actually, there's different types of Namabhas. We often say there's the one type of Namabhas, but actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he lists three main types of Namabhas. There is Namabhas without faith. This is the Namabhas that a Jamil performed. We know the text. Sanketyam parihasya va, stobham helanam va. These are the four types. There is indirect Namabhas, which is when you're exactly what a Jamil did. You see your child and you call him Narayan, and then you say Narayan. You're talking about someone else, but you're saying the holy name of the Lord. But you're not saying it with faith that Narayan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You're not saying it thinking he's not, but you're not saying it with faith in the holy name. Then there's parihasya. Sometimes people will unoffensively joke, with light heart, with respect, even with appreciation for the devotees. They'll say, you know, I had one friend in high school, and he would, obviously he knew I was involved with the devotees. And so whenever he'd see me, he'd say, Krishna, like that, as a joke, but not offensively. It's not that he was mocking the devotees or anything. He was just sweetly expressing that. That's also an example of that namabhas. Jokingly, but not offensively. Not an insulting joke. Then the next one is stobham. Stobham is not so common, so I won't comment it too much, but it's just, sometimes we know Sanskrit needs particular meters. So for poetry, sometimes you'll throw in the name Mukunda or something, Hey Yadav or something, just to make sure your meter is perfect. You're not doing it with any faith in the holy name, but you're still putting it in there and you're not saying it offensively. So faithless namabhas. And then last is helanam. This same word is the same word that is used to describe when Krishna lifts up Govardhan hill. It said he does it helana. He does it with ease, without much care, like a child picks up a mushroom. So it's when you casually say the holy name. Sometimes you stub your foot, or something, and obviously you've taken to a devotional life, you're trying not to swear. So you don't swear and you go, oh, Krishna, or something like this. Or sometimes you're frustrated, you don't know what to do, and you just say, Hare Krishna, like this you'll say, like this. It's very casually being said, but it's not being said offensively. It's not being said in a way that is minimizing the holy name necessarily. It's not being said with any of the 10 namaparads. So therefore, this is also namabhas, but it is faithless namabhas. When we say that we are moving beyond namaparad to namabhas, it is not these 4 that we are moving into. This is a different category. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has made the point that the category that we move into, there's actually 2 of Shraddha Namabhas. Namabhas with faith. There's Chaya and Pratibimba. There is Chaya is the shadow. We pray, Haha Prabhu Koro Doya Deho More Pada Chaya. Give us the shadow of your lotus feet. So Chaya Namabhas is the shadow of the Shuddha Nam, shadow of the holy name. And this is one form of Namabhas. The other is Pratibimba. Pratibimba means reflection, the reflected holy name. Of the 2, which one do people think is the higher one? Which one is better, Pratibimba, the reflected name, or Chaya, the shadow? Chaya, yes, it's Chaya. Normally people think is Pratibimba, because the reflection has all the colors, it has the very shape. The reflection in the pond is sometimes used the analogy. There's the tree, and the tree is being reflected in a pond, and it is also casting a shadow. And people will say, look at the reflection. It has all the qualities, it has all the apparent qualities, it has all the colors, it looks very nice, and the shadow is just black, dark, not even the right proportions. But there is 2 advantages that the shadow has over the reflection. If you swirl around the water, the tree is gone. And furthermore, the water, even though it is reflecting it, even though the reflection is there, it is not actually touching the tree. The shadow, as simple as it is still connected. If you follow the shadow all the way, it comes to the base of the tree. Pratibimba Namabhas is chanting with faith in the powers of the holy name, but chanting it with the goal of impersonal liberation or other goals that aren't true devotional goals. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, even though it's listed as Namabhas, it's closer to Namaparad. It's about as close as you can get to Namaparad without explicitly performing any of the 10 offenses. It is almost the offended name. Then, on the next level is Chaya Namabhas, and this is the Vaishnav Namabhas. When anarthas are still there, the anarthas still clog up our conception of the holy name, but still we are chanting with some understanding that we wish to gain devotional service, Krishna Prem. We are doing it for Krishna's pleasure. Filtered through so many anarthas, but still there. And then of course the Shuddha Nam, the true glorious holy name. If we chant once, what glories there are. So we should understand, this is the glories of the Namabhas, which Ajamil chanted. So we should understand categorically where they are. He was a very special case because he did not perform Namaparad. Most people perform some Namaparads. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says, the common Namaparads that are performed is to believe that the glories of the holy name are exaggerated, to make it equivalent of any of the other ritualistic activities in karma kanda, to interpret the holy name, and to sin on the strength of the holy name. That one's very common. And the most common, unfortunately, is Vaishnava Parad. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says of all of the Nama Parads, these are the most common. These are the ones that most commonly prevent people from being in a Jamil story. They prevent them from being in a Jamil case. And Vaishnava Parad especially, we know the wild elephant tearing up all of the devotional creepers. And that's why we should guard so strongly against Vaishnava Parad. No matter how many rounds, we can chant 128,000 rounds a day. And if we are performing Vaishnava Parad, if we are not appreciating the devotees, practically speaking, we may as well just clap our hands. Practically speaking, spiritually speaking, maybe materially speaking, it's still better. But spiritually speaking, we may as well say Coca-Cola. If we are committing Vaishnava Parad, we are cutting ourselves away from all the mercy of Bhakti Devi. And Vaishnava Parad is very easy to perform. On the one hand, we shouldn't worry about it too much. If our intentions are right, then Vaishnavas, out of their mercy, they will not take things too harshly. But still, we should guard strongly against it. In some Puranas, it's said that it is even Vaishnava Parad to not be happy upon seeing another devotee. Forget about being happy upon seeing another devotee. Sometimes we're less than happy. Sometimes we feel less than happy emotions upon seeing other devotees. But actually, we should cultivate these things because they're directly relevant to our chanting. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has said, if we do not guard against these, we cannot even hope to be in a Jamil, let alone a Haridas Thakur, let alone a Jiva Goswami, let alone a Rupa Goswami, let alone all of these great devotees who are very high, but we should aspire to be. So they're speaking all these glories, and even to glorify the holy name, what did the Vishnu Dutas say? They say that actually it is good. It is good that a Jamil performed all these sinful activities. Why? Because the Yamadutas, they say in response to this, they say, okay, maybe this is an explanation for why we couldn't take so many karma yogis, why we couldn't take so many gyanis. We could take all of them, but you guys didn't save them. This is a good explanation. But a Jamil was a Brahmin. A Jamil did lots of karma yoga. He did lots of fruitive activities. So shouldn't he be in that category? And then what did the Vishnu Dutas say? They say, because a Jamil has performed so much sin, he has gotten rid of all of his pious reactions from all of his karma kanda activities. But because he has gotten rid of those, he has also gotten rid of all of the association he had with the offenses he did to the holy name and to Bhakti Devi by incorporating them in his execution of karma kanda. Because he has eroded away all of his karma kanda conceptions. Not to say that he still doesn't have all the impious reactions. Not to say that he still doesn't have all those things, but because he has eroded away all his karma kanda conceptions, by falling so far away from karma kanda, he has become a blank slate. And a blank slate like this, he is able now to chant Namabhas. So these are the glories of the holy name. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says a very, very sweet point. This means that even the Brahmin who was perfectly executing, and we know in India today it is rare, but back then it was not so rare. And even now we can still find examples how strictly the Brahmins, they perform karma kanda. How strictly they perform these activities in order to keep their purity. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says the greatest non-Vaishnav Brahmin who is following most strictly the rules of all of the Vedic literature, of avoiding even the tiniest sin, even he has to fear infinitely more samsara and the hellish planets than even the great sinner, a Jamil. This is the glories of Namabhas. Forget then Shuddhanam. These are the glories that even the greatest Brahmin who is following all these things, because he might commit Nama Parad, he may interpret the holy name. He may interpret it as something else. He may make it equivalent to to the karma kanda activities. And doing that, he has so much more to fear than even the great sinner, Ajamil. This is the potency, these are the glories of the holy name, which make Kali Yuga, if they could balance out, forget about balancing out the sinful life of one great sinner, they can balance out the collective sinful lives of an entire yuga. In the same way that they could balance out all of the terrible credits Ajamil had, they can balance out all of the collective bad credits of this one Kali Yuga. We know Prabhupada, he said, before Dhritarashtra, he was a one-off. Now there is a, what was it, Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana? Now I'm forgetting in the purport which one he says. But either way, he says, before there was only one, but now there is one in every household. We can say the same of Ajamil. Back then, this is an extraordinary case. We know Shukdev Goswami, before he speaks of pastime, he says, this is a story which wise sages always quote to make the point of the supremacy of bhakti. This is a one-off great story. How terrible, how sinful this person could be. But now we know, practically speaking, you hear the offenses that Jamil did. He's an all-right guy by today's standards. He's all right, you know. At least he only left off with one or so prostitutes. At least he did something pious at the beginning of his life. By today's terrible standards, Ajamil is an all-right average person. He's not even the worst of the worst. Ajamil would shudder at some of the sins that we perform today. Ajamil himself would be shocked at them. But still, Namabhas is there. But in this age, we are so fortunate because it has not been Namabhas that Mahaprabhu preached. As glorious as Namabhas is, it has not even been Namabhas with faith that has been preached. It has been Shuddha Nam, and this Shuddha Nam can counteract all of that. So then we come back to that question though that I was saying. In the same way that the Yamadutas, they were challenging this. In the same way in Satya Yuga, they will be confused. They will hear these glories, and with their ahankar, which wants a challenge. Surely for me to end all of my material sufferings, it's not as easy as just saying Narayan. What to speak then of saying Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. What then to speak of that? Surely they'll say, by chanting this once, you know, my best friend, he received impersonal liberation after so many million years of sitting down and focusing on his breath. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, we cannot receive perfection just by blowing out of our nostril 3 times, because that's what the Ashtanga yogis, they'll do to purify themselves. My best friend, he received liberation after millions and millions of years of sitting down and counting breaths, and you're telling me by chanting this Maha Mantra just once, forget about impersonal liberation, I can become a personal associate of the Supreme Lord? No. Not true. Liberation must require a challenge. And so with that ahankar, they cannot come to it. They cannot have the faith. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, in order even to have that purifying namabhas, what is needed? Shraddha. Faith in the holy name is needed. So they cannot have that faith because of their ahankar. But then we come to Kali Yuga, and that ahankar is still there. But in Kali Yuga, we are in the very fortunate position that we are so degraded that actually chanting is a bit of a struggle for us. We are so degraded that our ahankar doesn't struggle with the idea. We'll think, oh wow, 16 rounds, Prabhu, very difficult. 16 rounds is very much a struggle, you know. In Satya Yuga, that was so easy that they couldn't have faith in it. They think, oh, you're joking, 16 rounds? In Kali Yuga, we're like, oh, Prabhu, I have 10 rounds left, how will I make it? So in Kali Yuga, our facilities are so much limited that it is easier for us to come to have faith in the holy name. That our position is so low, our abilities are so limited, that something so high, that is something that we need. If we're told we need to perform meditation to get out of here, If anyone's ever tried to perform mindfulness meditation, you know, I remember we did in pastoral care, they called it like the emotional development of teenagers in high school. My school was doing it. They were all progressive with that. And we did some mindfulness sort of meditation thing. And we were told, imagine there's an apple, and you're eating an apple, and visualize the apple perfectly. This was their meditation. Obviously, you can't meditate on anything useful because it has to be secular. So meditate on the apple, see every detail of the apple, and as you take every bite, see every bite in the apple. And so we were trying it, and you know, after a few seconds, I was like, oh, you know, I'm meditating the apple. After a minute or so, I was like, I'm just really hungry. I just want to eat an apple now. We can't focus on these things. And if we get told we must meditate merely on the breath for as long as we do need to meditate on the breath, we won't even try. Too difficult. But chanting the holy names, this is somehow possible for us. Somehow we will have faith. Somehow we will think this is a proper sadhana. If in Satya Yuga they were able to have the humility to understand these things, then they could get all the benefits that they get in Kali Yuga. But it is for this reason that it is said the glory of Kali Yuga is Sankirtan. And it is for this reason the Supreme Lord primarily propagates, either as a Shakti Vaishavata or in our blessed Kali Yuga, this Kali Yuga, as him himself. That's why he has propagated this chanting in this yuga. And it is the central principle of all sadhanas in this yuga. We know the 9 limbs of bhakti get expanded into 64. Rupa Goswami, the 64 limbs of devotional service. And after expanding it out, he then reduces it down from 9 to 64, and then from 64 down to 5, the Panchanga. Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavat Shroban, Mathura Vasa, and then Shri Murtir Shraddhaya Sevan. Like this. But all of these actually are forms of service to the holy name. Sadhu Sangha, what is Sadhu Sangha? The reason why we are told to do Sadhu Sangha is because it is in the association of the Vaishnavas that we can have faith in the holy name. A Jamil named his son Narayan. You don't name your son Narayan if you don't have the association of the devotee to tell you that the name Narayan is a great name. A Jamil chanted Namabhas because he had some Sadhu Sangha at some point in his life. Nama Kirtan, that's very obvious. Nama Kirtan is Nama Kirtan. Obviously, the holy name is undergirding that. Bhagavat Shroban, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam from beginning and end is glorifying the holy name, as we're really hearing this week. Every day, a different text, glorifying the glories of the holy name. Sanatana Goswami has said, another name for Bhagavat Purana is Nama Purana. It is the Purana of the holy name. Mathura Vas, to dwell in the Dham. Dwelling in the Dham just means Sadhu Sangha, and we've already established Sadhu Sangha. The Dham is made by those people who are chanting the holy name there constantly. Every place becomes like can become with the atmosphere of Vrindavan only by the chanting of the holy names. So even Mathura Vas, what is the underlying principle? The holy names. And then Shri Murtir, the seva to the deities, we know they are worshipped with what? With mantra. And what are the mantras composed with? None other than the holy names. So of all of these limbs of bhakti, actually everything in this Kali Yuga is undergirded by the holy name. And rightfully so. Because in this Kali Yuga we are very blessed to be so fallen that we can have enough faith in the Sankirtan movement and in the glories of the holy name. And so we should, especially in this week, take this faith, take with faith and chant the holy names, avoiding all aparads and trying our best to move beyond the platform of Namabhas to Shuddhanam. Because then at Shuddhanam we can taste all those glories that Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us. He has given a very special, not just Sankirtan, but Prema Sankirtan. This time the Sankirtan Yuga Dharma can give something much higher than it ever could, because the doors to Goloka have been opened up. So even more so, Kali Yuga is blessed, people are praying to come to it to perform Sankirtan, and of all Kali Yugas, this one is even more blessed, because in this one, the doors to Goloka have been opened.